Thank you, and thank you, Simone, for inviting me, and along with Jude England and Rob and all your colleagues at the British Library. I'm going to be talking about a project I did called Photographing Everyday Life, Aging, Lived Experiences, Time and Space, along with Katy Pilcher from Aston University. And our it's an ESSC funded project, and our interest has been in the daily life. How do we know, how do we understand, how can we learn and research the daily life? So what I hope to achieve in this presentation is I aim to highlight the context of the study about in the context of daily life in mid to later life. I'm going to outline a little bit about what the research involved and why we use visual methods. Why did we choose that method? What was it about it that we thought would enable us to learn more about daily life? And then I'm going to really focus, I'm going to sort of highlight the 5 key themes from the analysis that we've completed, but we're writing up. I'll let you know the 5 themes we're working with. But we're actually, on this presentation, because it can only really give you a taste of the project, I'm going to focus on social and virtual connectedness within daily lives of people mid to later life. They're really looking about people's social connections and arguing that the increasing use of virtual connections and how these play out in people's daily lives. Towards the end, you may have seen some mosaics and different pictures around. We've given you a sense of some of the findings of the project. I'm just going to say something about the interactive photographic exhibition we have with other participants and others at the end, and how we're trying to engage people in research in more in different ways. So how can we, by using art and using photographs, how can we get show our findings, but also and allow people to think about daily life and habitual life as well. So as I say, my interest is in on daily life, and the project is situated. It's very much in the ordinary, the mundane, the day-to-day, the habitual, the routinized. And the difficulty with being interested in the ordinary and the routinized and the everyday is it is so habitual that it's very hard to know how do we aim to get discourses about this. How do we aim to learn more about it if everything is so habitual, everything is so taken for granted? In fact, most of our daily life is defined by its absence, it's defined by us not remembering it. So maybe, as I often use an example, as often as speaking at a conference, today you might have thought about your journey, it would have been different, you probably may have thought about it yesterday, how you're going to get here, how all the different aspects of your routine, because it was a different routine. If it's an ordinary routine that you do every day, if I ask, when I drive to Brunel University down the M40, I remember very little about it. I have to unpick all the different parts of what I did that morning. Suddenly I'm at work, and actually unpick that. How do we? And this is the aim of this project. How can we try and gain and learn more about this? So the purpose of the project was to ask the question: would photography, would using a visual method, facilitate us to learn more about these daily routines, to learn more about the habitual, to learn more about the aspects that our minds have failed to consciously register as we just go about our lives. So these are the key aims of the project. We aim to explore the method of photography, and one of them, it is a methodological as well as a substantive question in that sort of way, to explore whether using photography would enable us to map and explore and document daily lived experiences. I think we'd probably argue it gave new insights into daily life, but there were problems with it as well. But we can talk about that maybe later. And to explore and reveal insights and theoretical understandings about the daily lives of people aged 50 years and over who have different types of routine. The research involved, there were 2 aspects to the research. The first of all, we gave people a camera for 1 week, and we asked them to take pictures of their daily life, just to take pictures of their routines and of their daily life. At the end of the week, we went back We uploaded the photographs that had been taken and we put them onto a laptop, and we did what was called photo elicitation. We used the photographs to talk through the routines and the weeks and their own experiences and of the method, but also to talk through their week. So there were two parts of that. Our sample included 42 women and 20 men who were aged 50 years and over, ranging from 50 to 85 years. We gained ethical approval. We also negotiated photo reproduction rights. So some people would choose to just use the photographs for analysis. So some photographs, some people chose to delete some, and some people gave us permission to show images publicly. These were the very broad-ranging 5 key themes that emerged from our thematic analysis using, we had about 5,000 images and about 62 interview data. So we had a lot of data, but through that process of emergent, broadly there were time and routines, private and public space, health risk in the body, work, volunteering and leisure. And the one I'm going to focus on now is connectivities and relationships. So I'm going to say more about that. Okay, the importance of connectivity or social connectivity came through the data. And this is the idea about the connections with family, partners, friends in the locality. So the wider international, and it is both in the globalised world, international communities. These were interspersed through the daily lives of participants, and connections were maintained and created both virtually, so using things like social networking, emails, and also in shared space and time, using shared time in terms of the telephone, or not shared space, but or living and working together, or actual visits when people were together, as we are today. And there were key interconnections around place, space, biography and identities. And there was aspects of the local and the global. And one thing that came through the data was the increasing presence of virtual connectivities and active engagement with new technologies of communication. Now, it's quite often seen that people growing older have a very passive engagement with the new technologies. But I hope that I'll give you a sense that this is quite active. It's not quite active as well, and maybe question some of that as well. Okay, here's some of the photographs of what people should say. There are lots of different means that people maintain their connections. So here we have the telephone, letter writing, and a mobile phone. So several different means and forms. Some of it was around sharing space, domestic space, or more public space. It could be arranged and organised time together, or it could be spontaneous time, or just randomly having to meet people as well. What's interesting in terms is how sometimes if we're going to talk about the increase of virtual connectivities and the use of screens, how it's changing domestic space, and it's also changing our everyday time as well, how we use our time, and it's shaping our time in many ways. So this is actually a work office, so a lot of these connections can be made through work, but they can also be made, there are also images of where they're made in domestic space as well. I think this image here is very interesting because there was a report out saying it's much younger people who use many different media at the same time. And it was like so people will be watching television, they'll be on telephone, emailing, doing several different things. And it was seen as a younger person's phenomenon. Actually, you can see here, this is increasingly, and with some of the, particularly as technologies change, and I think tablet-type technologies is changing this as well, there are more and more being integrated, and people are using more and more technologies at the same time, which has interesting impacts on people's lives as well. There would often be quite a significant purpose for why people chose different technologies for different usefulness and different type of relationships as well. So for Irene, she says, I talk to my friends on the phone constantly during the day. So it's more on the phone rather than in email. Yes, not all of my friends have email. I'd sooner talk to people than email them. So some people enjoyed the telephone, some people use the email, and I'll come back and say a little bit more about different aspects of whether people use email or not. so these technologies and the different connections can also shapes our daily lives, also shapes our space and our time as we experience it. So Hannah's saying, I realise how much a thread of the day, because I sort of observed, for a week before I sort of life, quite reflective thing, and I realised how much of it revolved around the computer. So checking emails at certain times a day, or certain aspects of the day, was actually shaping people's daily lives in many ways. So I suppose somewhere in the day I'd spend at least an hour on the computer, either sending or replying emails, looking up emails, and a great sort of pile of stuff that tends to be read or dealt with. So there's also the sense of it sort of can become sometimes accumulating around, I'm sure some of us have experienced. Well, although having said that, there would be certain purposes. So she, for Hannah, she was involved in a lot of social groups, and this was a very good way of keeping up to date with different groups and activities and things that were going on. And Victoria says, yes, that's my office. I've got my printer and computer and everything, and it's quite cool. You close the door, and everything goes away. So it can also be a space with you for people using these different virtual or other connections and how the space is used. Of course, these are becoming more and more incorporated into our daily lives, and this can be either within our lives, or it can be probably, as some of us have been doing today, as we move around in our lives as well. So obviously you can have your very static type connectivities with maybe a computer at home, but your mobile phone is much more embodied, it's with you, it's around you. So and so Samantha's saying, yeah, it's an important part of everyday life, your phone. I get my emails in it, I get texts in it, I have my diary on it, I have Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and things, I have music and everything on it. And she sort of, but alongside that, it could also be useful for certain roles or a certain relationship. So she always wanted to have a mobile phone on her because her aunt had dementia. So if something happened or if she wanted something, she had it on there, and you could have that more immediate contact with people as well. So there was a sense of having the phone with you, but also having sometimes certain purposes and maintaining certain relationships so that you can help and sort out different people. Of course, what was quite interesting during our project was that the iPad came out as we were doing the project, and as we came out, it came more and more within the photographs. And here we have Catherine saying, so I'll be watching the telly, and it's something he was watching. I'll be checking my emails and stuff on my iPad. I love my iPad. I use it every day. Yes, I sit there and I have a laptop and main computer. I just love it. It's convenient. You can use it for many different things, for Googling different information. And it was a very sensate type of, and the portable type thing. So, and it's interesting. It's being used within the domestic space as well as while people sharing domestic space, but also being in a virtual space with others as well. Some of these technologies, of course, things like Skype and other things. Skype, we're using Skype in terms of a mobile sort of telephone sort of system, is that it also allows about the potentiality of time, changing our activities in the potential time that people had. So Naomi had her sons were away, and one of them was going to be supposedly going to be contacting her one evening, and so she was doing the ironing, but she made sure she kept the Skype on. So whilst doing one task, was keeping something. So it's that potentiality of time of different types of relationships. So a lot of it can be, well, if I'm needed or if there's conversation, I'm there, but it can actually change people's activities. I don't know if anyone's done this one before, but Maria, who's 73, I didn't do anything. I went from 11:30 and I thought I'd do a quick bit of computer work before lunch, and at 3:30 I suddenly realised I hadn't eaten. There can be lost time. There can be time that disappears, and there's me working, and here it is at the bottom photograph here. Here's me working with a list of things to do, and they get absorbed into that very habitual time that we were talking about. Social media was quite central as well, and you can see see here with Annabelle, so you see I'm back on Facebook, and a lot of the social media was often around keeping contact with grandchildren or children, particularly who are overseas or just generally. And she says, I have a large family, and my 4 children, 8 children, are all going on Facebook, and a couple of friends I connect to, so all the time I can see what's going on. I can see what they're up to, so I know what's going on, who's fallen out with who and whose boyfriend or whatever. So there was this sort of sense of being there. It was quite interesting because some of her family was overseas, but some of it was quite local, and they would come round and go on Facebook together, so it could also be a connectivity in a way. Of course, with the one thing with Skype is you can choose or choose not to have visual connections with people. And it was so sometimes if you were somewhere, you could share that visual connectivity with others, in the sense that you know, you could share, oh, look, here I am, and show the wider environment you're in, and that type of thing, or see the person. And so for Dorothy, she talks about talking to her grandchildren and videoing them, and you can see them on the screen. That became very important. That was the purpose for using them. But although sometimes it could have the opposite effect, Christopher says, so you go on Skype, and I don't know why I need to be visiting them all the time. I can see them on Skype, so do we need to go and visit as well? So the visual side of it can maybe have two sides to it as well. Some of the discourses around age did come through, and a lot of it was about different people who were on technologies and not on technologies, and how, particularly around groups and social groups, how to negotiate this. How do you negotiate? Do you want to move forward and have you know, only email contact, you know, for different reasons, or do we people keep sending hard copies? And this was a real challenge for many people, and one of the discourses were there a bit about who's on email and not email, and it came through, I think, a few times around about what to do in that sort of situation, and was quite complex. Of course, having the virtual connectivities, we mustn't forget that, you know, we've all come to the one space and place that we can be in shared time and space. There is something different about being in the same place, an embodied co-presence that we obviously gain from it. And some social connectedness could happen in many different ways. It could be through social groups, and this was a walking group. I like walking, and I mean, it's a friend who invited me into the group because they just for booking and a reservation at the pub. And it's a comfortable size, and it's a regular meeting. It's something that happened regularly, and a walking group that people could could engage with in that way. Some of it, that's very organised in some ways, a social group, but things like actually walking dogs was a real way that many people, because a lot of people walked dogs or whatever, or their animal, or they're caring for their animals at the same time because they're very routinized. And actually a lot of the photographs come through with cats and dogs and different animals about how they are actually central to the domestic world, but also central to the routinized world. So people would be walking and would meet the same people, the same dogs, the same people. So it is the sense of embodied co-presence, of being together is also very important. Whether that's having coffee mornings once a week with your friends, whether it's sometimes having meals and things. So different places, a lunch club, and different places to go and have the company and the being together, the being in the same time and space. So just another form for us as researchers, we're very interested in how we can connect with people, and particularly now is around public engagement. And one of the ways we tried to achieve this at the end on the last day of the project as such, or the funded part of the project, is that we had an interactive photographic exhibition. We invited all our participants to come back, and we invited wider people whoever wanted to come were very welcome to come. And we worked with an artist for 6 weeks. And some of the sort of mosaics you've seen around and some of the pictures, obviously we give you a little taste of what we did. We worked with an artist who created a space in which there was a garden area, a sitting area. You can see a sitting area here. And it was for people to touch and feel and be part of the exhibition. It wasn't sort of because actually having photographs of daily life is not what you normally have in an art gallery, which is quite interesting. So it was bringing it together and having conversations with people, and also another source of data about people. We gained people's ideas and people's thinking. We had these photographs. We had lots of photographs of washing and gardens, and these were put up as a washing line. there. I love the washing line. Who knew washing was so beautiful? And participants would stand by so the picture of their washing and take their picture of themselves. So there was another layer of what going on there, and how the ordinary is indeed extraordinary. So just to sort of briefly summarise, just to say that exploring the routines and patterns underpin the daily life of people mid to late has enabled us to make visible how people build, maintain, experience their social and virtual connection. The importance of connectivity really came through, having connections with family, partners, friends and locality in the wider community to maintain virtually and or in immediate shared space and time. And there was definitely increasing presence of virtual connectivities, and I would argue that was an active engagement with these new technologies. They were used for certain purposes, whether they were seen as useful or not, and if they weren't seen as useful, they weren't engaged with. So there was very much an active thing. There were some narratives around technologies that both challenge and reinforce, whether they both challenge and reinforce some ideas about ageing. Okay, so thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Wendy. We've got time for a couple of questions and answers. There's one over here.
You said that you might talk about some of the problems you experienced, but I'm quite interested in this as a method, so I'd love to hear what the pros and cons were.
In terms of daily life?
Well, just in terms of how using photography facilitated the analysis and what barriers or problems there were.
The participants really liked it. They were completely in control of the of what they decided to photograph or not. We gave them a camera, so it was completely participatory and in that sort of sense. I suppose the issues with it is amount of data. You know, how many visual images you can collate and therefore need to analyse. It can be quite a complexity. In terms of actually whether it worked as a method to explore daily life, I think it gave some really intriguing and interesting connection ideas and insights into daily life and learning about it. At the same time, we don't know there's also the issue of what representation, what does an image mean? I haven't talked about the methodology here, but for example, if someone took a photograph of a Tesco bag, we did all the analysis of the photos correctly, we thought person gone shopping or something. But actually when we spoke to them, they said, oh yeah, I went shopping and I went shopping earlier and I just remembered I hadn't taken the photograph. So I put the biscuits back in the photograph and then took the picture. So there's this representation of what does a photograph mean. So that's obviously an issue as well. And also, I mean, I think in all research is silences, absence, deletions, and so that those are issues that can be balanced. But at the same time, I think it did give very interesting and engaging insights into daily life. And when people came back to the exhibition, people really did write and talk about how they re-engage with daily life and thought about their routines. So in that sort of sense, it worked as well. So it's about balancing those different aspects, I suppose.
Go ahead, go with yours.
Wendy, thank you so much. As always, I listen to you forever. As someone who's also very interested in researching daily life, I wonder if you could say something about the kind of how you might get funding, how you justify what seems like an observation as daily lives to funders, because it doesn't have any of these massive policy implications or helping us with successful aging or those kinds of things.
Well, I would argue it probably does, because it's interesting, because actually people who I find occupational therapists and physiotherapists had an absolute fascination with my project, because they go into people's home and all about people enabling people to be independent within the home is all about daily life. I would say I would argue without understanding, I would actually start with in terms of policy, without understanding people's daily lives and how they really led, and not a perceived idea of what they're led, as some of these stereotypes that we've heard about, the positive and the negative. And the other thing in terms of this particular method, I would argue we also have a database that hopefully will challenge some of those positive, as I have done other work on analysing images around positive and negative images of stereotypes of ageing around visual images that are constantly used in health promotion, policy and other aspects we've had. But we've actually got people's ordinary lives. This is a database that can start to challenge maybe that these are people's lives. If you show these photographs to any audience, they would not look like any. The first 10 photographs I sometimes show of some people's, they would look like anybody's morning. You would not know. Do you know what I mean? And they can really maybe use to challenge some of these. Yeah. But of course, funding is of course an issue. But I think you can make the argument. Hopefully, we obviously did make an argument. Can't remember what it is now.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.